The raging waters of the Powder River crashed against the rocky banks with a fury that made the earth tremble beneath Nora Blackburn's feet. Spring of 1878 had brought the worst flooding anyone in Wyoming Territory had seen in decades. Nora stood at the edge of the surging waters, her heart hammering against her ribs as she spotted the small figure clinging to a partially submerged wagon nearly 30 yards downstream. "Help!" The child's terrified voice barely carried over the roar of the floodwaters. "Please, help me." Without hesitation, Nora gathered her skirts and waded into the frigid water. The current immediately tugged at her legs, threatening to sweep her away. The cold cut through her like knives, but she pressed forward, determined to reach the boy before the wagon was completely swallowed by the merciless river. "Madam, stop!" A deep voice boomed from behind her. Strong hands gripped her shoulders, pulling her back from the churning waters. "You'll drown going in like that." Nora whirled around, coming face to face with a tall man with broad shoulders and piercing blue eyes beneath the brim of a worn leather hat. His face was weathered by sun and wind, but his expression conveyed both authority and concern. "There's a child out there," she cried, pointing frantically toward the wagon. "We can't just stand here." The stranger glanced past her, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the situation. In one fluid motion, he removed his hat and coat, dropping them onto the muddy bank. "I'll get him. You stay," he said firmly, already unlacing his boots. "That current will sweep you away in seconds. But trust me." The intensity in his gaze silenced her protest. "I've pulled folks from these waters before." Without another word, he dove into the river with powerful strokes, cutting through the current with a strength that left Nora breathless. She watched, hands pressed to her mouth in prayer, as the stranger battled the raging waters to reach the terrified child. Nora had arrived in Silver Creek just 3 days earlier, stepping off the stagecoach with nothing but 2 valises and dreams of a fresh start. After losing her husband to influenza back in Philadelphia, the teaching position in this frontier town had seemed like divine providence, a chance to escape the memories that haunted every corner of her former life. Now, as she watched this unknown cowboy risk his life to save a child, she wondered what kind of place she had come to, where strangers would throw themselves into danger without a second thought. The man reached the wagon and carefully pried the boy from his precarious perch. The child wrapped his arms around the cowboy's neck as they began the treacherous journey back to shore. Twice they disappeared beneath the swirling waters, each time causing Nora's heart to seize. But the man's strength prevailed, and eventually he staggered onto the muddy bank. The boy clutched securely to his chest. Nora rushed forward, helping to ease the child onto solid ground. The boy couldn't have been more than 6 or 7, with dark hair plastered to his pale face. His lips trembled with cold and fear. "Tommy!" A woman's desperate cry came from up the path. A moment later, a frantic mother arrived, falling to her knees beside her son, gathering him into her arms with sobs of relief. "You're all right now, Mrs. Parker," the cowboy said between heavy breaths, water streaming from his soaked clothing. "Boy's got more courage than sense, but he'll be fine." "Thank you, Mr. Ryder," the woman managed through her tears. "How can I ever repay you?" "No need," he replied, straightening to his full height. "Just keep a closer eye on the boy while these floodwaters are up." The woman nodded, helping her shivering son to his feet. "I'll get him home and warmed up right away." She looked at Nora with grateful eyes. "Thank you too, miss." After they departed, Nora turned to the man, suddenly aware she was standing before a stranger who was soaked to the bone. "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen, Mr. Ryder." He retrieved his hat, shaking some of the water from his hair before meeting her gaze. "Wade Ryder, madam. And out here, we look after one another. It's the only way to survive." "Nora Blackburn," she replied. "I'm the new school teacher." A flash of recognition crossed his features. "Ah, from Philadelphia. Doc Miller mentioned you'd be arriving. He assessed her with a curious gaze. This ain't Philadelphia, Miss Blackburn. The territory can be unforgiving. I'm beginning to see that, she said, glancing at the churning waters that had nearly claimed 2 lives. But I also see there are good people here. Wade nodded, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. The schoolhouse is on the north end of town. If you need anything, my ranch is 3 miles east. He donned his wet coat, grimacing at the discomfort. Welcome to Silver Creek, Miss Blackburn. As he turned to leave, Nora called after him. Mr. Ryder? When he looked back, she continued. Thank you. Not just for the boy, but for stopping me. You saved 2 lives today. His expression softened momentarily. Just doing what needed doing, madam. Nothing more. As she watched him walk away, his tall figure silhouetted against the stormy sky, Nora couldn't help but feel that Silver Creek might offer more than just escape. Perhaps here, amidst the wild beauty and danger of the frontier, she might find something she hadn't realized she was searching for. The Silver Creek schoolhouse was a modest 1-room building with rows of simple wooden desks facing a small teacher's desk and blackboard. When Nora arrived the next morning, she found the floors freshly swept and a bouquet of wildflowers on her desk. A note beside them read simply, "Welcome to Silver Creek, Mrs. Miller." The doctor's wife had been kind enough to help Nora get settled in the small cabin behind the schoolhouse that served as the teacher's residence. It was sparse but clean, with a bed, a small stove, and a writing desk more than adequate for Nora's needs. Throughout the day, children filed in with their parents, curious to meet the new teacher from back east. Nora greeted each family warmly, taking mental notes of names and faces. There were 12 students in total, ranging from 6 to 14 years of age. Miss Blackburn, called a familiar voice as the schoolroom was emptying out. Mrs. Parker stood in the doorway, young Tommy at her side. I wanted to properly introduce my son. He'll be in your class, assuming he doesn't get himself swept away in any more floods. The boy ducked his head, embarrassed. Nora approached and knelt to his eye level. Hello, Tommy. I'm very glad to meet you, especially under better circumstances than yesterday. Thank you, madam, he mumbled. Tommy was trying to save his pa's tools from the wagon when it got caught in the flood, Mrs. Parker explained. His father passed last winter, and those tools, well, they meant something to him. Nora's heart constricted. She understood all too well the desperate need to hold on to something, anything that connected you to someone you'd lost. That was very brave, Tommy, but very dangerous. I hope next time you'll ask for help. The boy nodded solemnly. Speaking of help, Mrs. Parker continued, Mr. Ryder stopped by our place this morning. He managed to fish out most of Robert's tools from downriver, even cleaned and oiled them. Something warm flickered in Nora's chest. That was extremely thoughtful of him. That's Wade, Mrs. Parker said with a knowing smile. Never makes a fuss, just quietly does what needs doing. She paused, studying Nora. He's a good man. Keeps to himself mostly since he came back from the war, but there's not a person in Silver Creek who wouldn't trust him with their life. The war. Nora wondered which battles Wade Ryder had fought, what horrors he had witnessed. Her late husband had been spared that experience due to a childhood injury that left him with a permanent limp. Will school still start tomorrow with all the flooding? Tommy asked, changing the subject. Nora smiled. Indeed it will. Rain or shine, education waits for no one. After the Parkers left, Nora found herself standing at the schoolhouse window, gazing east toward where Wade had said his ranch lay. She wondered what kind of life he had carved out there, what demons from the war still haunted him, and why the thought of him rescuing a child's treasured tools made her heart beat just a little faster. The first week of school passed in a blur of lessons, names to memorize, and adjusting to frontier life. Nora had not seen Wade Ryder again, though she had heard his name mentioned frequently around town, always with respect, occasionally with concern about his solitary existence. Saturday morning found Nora at Henderson's general store, purchasing supplies for the coming week. Mr. Henderson, a portly man with a jovial disposition, was helping her select quality pencils for her students when the shop door swung open, bringing with it a gust of spring air and the commanding presence of Wade Ryder. He looked different than he had by the river, clean-shaven, his brown hair neatly combed, wearing a fresh shirt beneath a leather vest. His eyes found Nora immediately, recognition flickering across his features. "Miss Blackburn," he greeted, tipping his hat. "Settling in well?" "Mr. Ryder," she replied, suddenly aware of how disheveled she must look after a morning of cleaning her cabin. "Yes, thank you. Silver Creek has been most welcoming." Mr. Henderson looked between them with undisguised interest. "Wade, did you bring that list from Sarah Miller? Doc said you'd be delivering some supplies out to the Jackson place." Wade produced a folded paper from his vest pocket. "Medicine for their youngest. Fever's not breaking." Nora frowned. "Little Emma? She wasn't in class yesterday. Is it serious?" "Doc's concerned," Wade replied. "Their place is 15 miles out, and with the road still bad from the flooding, horseback's the only way to get there quickly." "I've got everything nearly ready," Henderson said, disappearing into the back room. Wade turned his attention back to Nora. "How are you finding our little town, Miss Blackburn? Must be quite a change from Philadelphia." "It is," she admitted, "but a welcome one. There's an honesty to life here that I find refreshing." "Honesty?" A slight smile touched his lips. "That's not usually what city folk notice first." "Perhaps I'm not typical city folk," she replied, matching his smile. "I've always believed character reveals itself most clearly in how we respond to hardship. Out here, there's no hiding behind social niceties when a river's rising or a child has fever." Something shifted in Wade's expression, a warming, an opening. "You might be right about that." He paused. "I heard you've been asking about books for the school. Henderson doesn't stock much beyond basic primers." "Yes, I'm hoping to expand our little library. Many of these children have never been exposed to literature beyond the Bible and almanacs." Wade nodded thoughtfully. "I have a fair collection at my place. Military history mostly, but some classics too. My mother was particular about education, even out here. You're welcome to borrow whatever might be useful." Nora couldn't hide her surprise. "That's very generous, Mr. Ryder." "Not at all. Books gather dust if they're not read." He hesitated. "Perhaps you could come by the ranch tomorrow afternoon. I'll be back from the Jacksons by then." Henderson returned with a package wrapped in brown paper. "Here you are, Wade. Everything Doc requested." Wade tucked the package carefully into his saddlebag. "Thank you for the offer, Mr. Ryder," Nora said. "Would 3 o'clock be convenient?" "3 would be fine," he replied, touching the brim of his hat. "Follow the east road out of town. There's a creek crossing about 2 miles out, then my gate's another half-mile beyond. Can't miss it." After he left, Henderson chuckled softly. "Well, I'll be. Haven't seen Wade Ryder extend an invitation to anyone in a long while." "It's merely about books, Mr. Henderson." Of course," the shopkeeper agreed, though his eyes twinkled knowingly. "Just interesting, is all. Wade keeps to himself since coming back from the war. Runs his ranch, helps folks when needed, but doesn't socialize much." "The war changed many men," Nora said quietly, thinking of the haunted looks she'd seen in soldiers' eyes back east. "That it did. Wade served with the Union cavalry, distinguished himself too, from what I heard. Came back different, though. Quieter. Bought that ranch and poured himself into building it up." Henderson wrapped Nora's purchases carefully. "His folks were good people. Mother died while he was away fighting. Father passed a few years later." Nora absorbed this information, piecing together the portrait of the man who had plunged into raging waters to save a child without hesitation. "It's not easy to lose those we love," she said softly. "No, madam, it surely isn't," Henderson agreed, studying her with kind eyes. "Heard you suffered your own loss before coming here." "My husband, yes. Influenza took him last fall." She forced a smile. "Silver Creek represents a new chapter for me." "Well, we're mighty glad to have you. These children need learning and—" He hesitated. "Maybe some folks around here could use some fresh perspective too." The next day, Nora set out on the gentle mare she'd borrowed from Mrs. Miller. The air was clear after days of rain, and spring wildflowers dotted the landscape in splashes of yellow and purple. Following Wade's directions, she found the creek crossing and continued east until a wooden arch with Ryder Ranch carved into the crossbeam marked the entrance to his property. A well-maintained dirt road led to a modest but handsome two-story house built of sturdy logs with a wide porch wrapping around the front. Nearby stood a large barn, corrals, and several outbuildings. Everything spoke of careful maintenance, fences straight and strong, buildings well repaired. As Nora approached, Wade emerged from the barn. He wore simple work clothes and had clearly been engaged in physical labor, but he greeted her with the same quiet dignity he'd shown in town. "Miss Blackburn," he called, striding toward her. "Let me help you down." His hands were strong and sure as they spanned her waist, lifting her effortlessly from the saddle. For a moment they stood close enough that Nora could detect the scent of hay and horses and clean sweat. She stepped back, suddenly flustered. "Thank you for inviting me, Mr. Ryder. Your ranch is beautiful." "Built most of it myself," he said, leading her horse to a hitching post. "Come inside, I've put some coffee on." The interior of Wade's home revealed a man of unexpected complexity. The furnishings were simple but well crafted. Bookshelves lined one wall of the main room, filled with volumes both worn and well preserved. A desk near the window held papers in neat stacks. Everything was orderly, clean, not what Nora had expected from a bachelor rancher. "Your home is lovely," she said honestly. "My mother would be pleased to hear that," Wade replied, pouring coffee into 2 cups. "She always insisted that civilization wasn't something you left behind just because you lived on the frontier." Nora accepted the coffee gratefully. "She sounds like a wise woman." "She was?" A shadow passed over his features. "Died while I was fighting at Gettysburg. Never got to say goodbye." "I'm sorry," Nora said softly. "That must have been terribly difficult." Wade nodded, his gaze distant. "War teaches you that life doesn't wait. People don't wait." He seemed to catch himself, returning to the present. "But you came for books, not melancholy reminiscences." He led her to the bookshelves. "Take whatever might be useful. Dickens, Hawthorne, some poetry. Even have a few science texts my father collected." Nora ran her fingers along the spines, delighted. "This is a treasure, Mr. Ryder. The children will benefit enormously." "Wade," he said abruptly. "Pardon?" "Please call me Wade. Mr. Ryder always makes me look around for my father." His small smile transformed his face, softening the hard lines into something that made Nora's breath catch. "Then you must call me Nora." They spent an hour selecting books for the school, their conversation flowing more easily than Nora had anticipated. Wade was well-read and thoughtful, offering insights about which texts might engage the frontier children. "Many of these students have never seen a city or a large body of water," he explained. "But they understand struggle and perseverance better than most adults I knew back east." As Nora examined a volume of American poetry, Wade watched her with growing interest. "May I ask what brought you to Wyoming Territory, Nora? Teaching positions must be plentiful in Philadelphia." She was silent for a moment, weighing how much to share. "After my husband died, everything in Philadelphia reminded me of him, of us. Every street, every shop. Her voice softened. The silence in our home was unbearable. So you came to one of the most silent places in the country, Wade observed, not unkindly. The silence here is different, Nora explained. In the city, silence means absence. Here, it's presence, the land, the sky. It speaks in its own way. Wade's eyes held hers, understanding flickering in their blue depths. I felt the same after the war. Couldn't stand being in crowded places. Too many memories, too much noise inside my head. He paused. Out here, a man can hear himself think, can find peace, eventually. Have you? She asked softly. Found peace? Some days, he admitted. Others, not so much. But it gets easier. He glanced at the window, noting the angle of the sun. Would you like to see the rest of the ranch before you head back? Daylight's still good. They walked together through the corrals where Wade showed her his horses, explaining each one's temperament and strengths. His pride in the animals was evident in every word, in the gentle way he handled them. This is Solomon, he said, introducing a magnificent black stallion with a white blaze, best horse I've ever owned. Smart as they come and brave too. It was Solomon who got us through the river to Tommy. Nora approached the fence, and the horse stretched his neck toward her, nostrils flaring. He's beautiful, she said, reaching out slowly to stroke his muzzle. He doesn't usually take to strangers, Wade remarked, watching them with curiosity. I've always had a way with animals, Nora replied. My father raised horses outside Philadelphia when I was a girl. I learned to ride before I could properly walk. Is that so? Wade's expression brightened. Most ladies from the East I've encountered view horses as necessary inconveniences. I'm finding there's quite a bit about me that doesn't conform to your expectations of Eastern ladies, Nora said with a touch of mischief. Wade's laugh was unexpected and transformative, erasing years from his face. I stand corrected, Miss Blackburn. As they walked back to the house, the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, bathing everything in golden light. Wade loaded the books they'd selected into a burlap sack and secured it to Nora's saddle. Thank you for your generosity, she said as he helped her mount. The children will be thrilled. My pleasure, he replied, his hands lingering briefly at her waist. Perhaps you might come again. There are more books, and... He hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. I enjoyed your company. Warmth spread through Nora's chest. I'd like that very much. As she rode back toward town, Nora reflected on the afternoon. Wade Ryder was not what she had expected, not the simple cowboy or the brooding war veteran she might have imagined. He was complex, thoughtful, carrying wounds that had shaped but not defined him. She recognized in him something of her own journey, the struggle to build a new life after loss, to find meaning in the afterwards. For the first time since arriving in Silver Creek, Nora felt something like anticipation stirring within her. Not just for the challenge of teaching or the adventure of frontier life, but for the possibility of connection, the chance to know this man whose quiet strength and hidden depths had begun to captivate her imagination. The following weeks brought steady spring rains to Silver Creek, turning the landscape a vibrant green. Nora threw herself into teaching, delighting in her students' enthusiasm for the books Wade had lent them. Tommy Parker, in particular, had shown a remarkable aptitude for reading, devouring everything Nora put before him. Wade became a regular visitor to the schoolhouse, initially under the pretense of bringing more books or inquiring about the children's progress. Soon, however, he was helping repair the leaking roof, building new shelves for the growing collection of teaching materials, and occasionally joining the older boys for their mathematics lessons. One afternoon in late May, as the children were being dismissed, Wade arrived with his wagon. Thought you might appreciate a ride home, he said, noting the dark clouds gathering on the horizon. Storm's coming in fast. Nora gratefully accepted, and they had barely reached her cabin when the skies opened. Rain pounded on the roof as Wade carried in the day's school books and materials. "Would you like some tea while we wait for the downpour to ease?" Nora offered, suddenly aware of the intimacy of her small dwelling. "Thank you," Wade replied, removing his hat. He stood awkwardly in the center of the one-room cabin, seeming too large for the modest space. As Nora busied herself with the kettle, she felt Wade's eyes following her movements. The air between them seemed charged with something neither had put into words. "I received a letter from the school board today," she said, breaking the tension. "They've approved funds for new readers for the younger children." "That's good news," Wade replied. "They're taking you seriously now." "Thanks in large part to you," Nora acknowledged. "Your support has meant a great deal." Wade shook his head. "You've earned their respect on your own merit, Nora. These past weeks I've watched you transform that schoolroom into a place of genuine learning. The children are flourishing under your guidance." "It's rewarding work," she said, placing a cup of tea before him. "I feel I've found my purpose here." Thunder rumbled overhead, and rain lashed against the windows. Wade sipped his tea thoughtfully. "When I pulled Tommy from the river that day, I never imagined it would lead to this." "To what?" Nora asked softly. Wade met her gaze, his eyes reflecting the lamplight. "To meeting someone who would challenge the way I've been living." He set down his cup. "I've kept to myself since the war, Nora. Found it easier that way. Safer. And now?" Her heart quickened. "Now I find myself looking for reasons to ride into town. I wake up thinking about what books you might enjoy or what story you might have told in class." He paused, uncertainty crossing his features. "I don't know if that's welcome." Nora moved to sit beside him. "It's very welcome, Wade." For a moment neither spoke. The rain drummed steadily on the roof, cocooning them in a world of their own making. "I should go," Wade said finally, though he made no move to leave. "People will talk if I stay much longer." "People already talk," Nora replied with a small smile. "Mrs. Henderson asked me yesterday if I was considering settling permanently in Silver Creek, with a look that suggested she wasn't inquiring about my teaching position." Wade's laugh was soft and warm. "Small towns." "Indeed." Nora hesitated, then continued. "But perhaps there's something to their speculation." Wade's gaze intensified. "Nora, I'm not a simple man. The war left scars that don't show. Some nights I still wake fighting battles long ended." His voice roughened. "You deserve someone whole." "Do you think I'm unmarked by loss?" she asked gently. "We all carry something, Wade. The question is whether we carry it alone or—" She trailed off, suddenly unsure of her boldness. "Or together," he finished, reaching for her hand. His calloused fingers entwined with hers, warm and steady. "I've been alone a long time. Since before the war, really. Never thought I'd want it any other way." "And now?" Nora's voice was barely above a whisper. "Now I'm sitting in your cabin, holding your hand, thinking that maybe solitude isn't the answer after all." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "But I don't want to rush you. You're still healing too." "Yes," she admitted. "But healing doesn't happen in isolation. At least, not the kind that matters." Outside, the storm began to subside, the pounding rain softening to a gentle patter. Wade reluctantly released her hand and stood. "I should get back to the ranch before dark." As he donned his hat, Nora walked with him to the door. "Thank you for the ride. And the conversation." Wade paused, his hand on the doorframe. "The town's having a social next Saturday. Dance, picnic, that sort of thing. Would you consider accompanying me?" Nora's heart leapt. "I would be delighted." Wade's smile was slow but radiant. "Until Saturday, then." After he left, Nora stood in her doorway watching his wagon disappear down the muddy road. The air smelled fresh after the rain, filled with the promise of growing things. For the first time since James's death, she felt a genuine excitement for the future, not just acceptance or resignation, but anticipation for what might come. Word of Wade Ryder escorting Nora Blackburn to the town social spread through Silver Creek faster than wildfire in August. By Saturday morning, Nora had received 3 separate visits from well-meaning townswomen offering advice on her appearance and gentle inquiries about her intentions toward their community's most eligible bachelor. Mrs. Miller, the doctor's wife, was the most direct. "Wade Ryder hasn't attended a social function in this town since before the war," she declared, helping Nora press her best dress. "The fact that he's not only coming but asked to escort you has set every tongue wagging from here to Cheyenne." "We're friends," Nora protested weakly. "He's been tremendously helpful with the school." Mrs. Miller's knowing smile said she wasn't fooled. "Of course, dear, and I'm sure it's your teaching methods he's admiring when he watches you from the doorway." Nora felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to anyone with eyes," the older woman replied kindly. "And it's a good thing, Nora. Wade's one of the finest men I know. He deserves happiness. As do you." The social was held in a meadow near the center of town. Tables laden with food lined one side, while a wooden platform had been constructed for dancing. Lanterns hung from posts, ready to illuminate the gathering once darkness fell. Wade arrived precisely at 4 o'clock, driving a freshly painted buggy pulled by Solomon in polished harness. He wore a dark suit that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders, his hair neatly trimmed, his face cleanly shaven. Nora's breath caught at the sight of him standing on her doorstep, hat in hand. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "As do you," she replied, admiring his transformation from rancher to gentleman. "I've never seen you in a suit before." "Don't wear it often," he admitted with a self-conscious smile. "Feels strange after buckskins and denims." "It suits you," she assured him, accepting his arm. They arrived at the social to find nearly the entire population of Silver Creek already gathered. Conversation lulled momentarily as heads turned to observe their entrance, then resumed with renewed vigor. "Feels like we're on display at Henderson's store window," Wade murmured. "Small towns," Nora reminded him with a smile. Wade's hand covered hers where it rested on his arm. "Worth every stare." The afternoon passed pleasantly as Nora was introduced to families she hadn't yet met through the school. Wade remained at her side, his initial discomfort in the social setting gradually easing as they shared conversations, food, and eventually, as the musicians struck up a lively tune, a dance. "I should warn you," Wade said as he led her to the platform. "I haven't danced since before the war. Might step on your toes." "I'll risk it," Nora replied, placing her hand in his. His arm circled her waist, and Nora was acutely aware of his strength, the solid warmth of him as they moved to the music. Wade's warning proved unnecessary. He moved with the same natural grace he showed on horseback, guiding her confidently through the steps. "You dance beautifully for a man out of practice," she observed. "Good partner," he replied, his eyes never leaving hers. They danced until the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the meadow. As lanterns were lit and the music shifted to slower melodies, Wade led Nora away from the crowd toward a quiet spot beside a stand of cottonwoods. "Needed a moment away from all those watchful eyes," he explained. Nora leaned against a tree trunk, grateful for the cool evening air against her flushed skin. "I've never been the center of so much attention." "Regrets?" Wade asked, studying her face in the gathering dusk. "Not one," she assured him. "This has been a wonderful evening." Wade moved closer, his presence enveloping her like a physical force. "Nora," he began, his voice low and serious, "these past weeks, getting to know you, They've changed something in me. He paused, searching for words. I came back from the war believing I was better off alone, safer that way, no one to disappoint, no one to lose. And now? Her voice was barely audible over the distant music. Now I find myself thinking of a future that isn't solitary. His hand rose to touch her cheek, feather light. You make me want things I'd convinced myself were not for me. Nora leaned into his touch. I understand. After James died, I thought that chapter of my life was closed forever. I came west to escape memories, not to create new ones. And yet, here we are, Wade said softly. Here we are, she echoed. In the gentle glow of distant lanterns, Wade bent toward her, hesitating just a breath away. Nora closed the distance between them, her lips meeting his in a kiss that began tentatively, but quickly deepened with shared longing. His arms encircled her, drawing her against him as though she were something precious he feared might slip away. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Wade rested his forehead against hers. I'm falling in love with you, Nora Blackburn. Haven't said those words to anyone since I was barely more than a boy, but they're true all the same. Joy washed through her, unexpected and overwhelming. And I with you, Wade Ryder, against all logic and planning. He laughed softly, the sound rumbling in his chest where Nora's hand rested. Logic seems overrated at this particular moment. From the direction of the social came calls and laughter as a new dance began. Wade stepped back reluctantly. We should return before they send out a search party. As they walked hand in hand back toward the lights and music, Nora felt as though she were moving into a future suddenly rich with possibility, not the solitary existence of duty and quiet reflection she had imagined when boarding the stagecoach to Silver Creek, but something infinitely more vibrant and alive. The months that followed were the happiest Nora had known in years. As spring yielded to summer, her relationship with Wade deepened. They settled into a rhythm. Wade would ride into town several evenings a week, sometimes joining Nora for dinner at her cabin, other times escorting her to his ranch, where they would read together on his porch as the sun set behind the mountains. On Sundays after church, they often rode into the surrounding countryside, Wade showing Nora hidden valleys and vistas that few townspeople ever ventured to see. It was during these private excursions that Wade gradually shared more of his wartime experiences, not the glorified versions that some veterans told, but the raw, haunting truths of what he had witnessed and done. There were moments, he confessed one afternoon as they rested beside a mountain stream, when I didn't recognize myself anymore, when I looked at my hands and saw only what they had destroyed, not what they could build. Nora listened, offering not platitudes but understanding. And now? What do you see when you look at your hands? Wade considered them strong, calloused, marked by years of hard work. Possibility, he said finally. The ranch I've built. The things I've fixed. He reached for her hand. The woman I hope to hold for the rest of my days. The school term ended in late June, and Nora found herself with an unexpected dilemma when the board asked if she would commit to returning in September. The question forced her to contemplate her future in Silver Creek, and with Wade more concretely than she had allowed herself to do. You're considering leaving? Wade asked that evening as they sat on his porch. The question casual, but his eyes watchful. No, Nora replied honestly. But signing a contract for another year feels significant. When I came here, I wasn't sure if this was temporary or permanent. And now? She met his gaze steadily. Now I can't imagine being anywhere else. Relief washed over his features. I'm glad to hear that. What about you? She asked. Have you ever thought of leaving Silver Creek? Going somewhere with more opportunities? Wade shook his head. This land is part of me now. My father staked his claim here when there was nothing but wilderness. Built something worth keeping. He paused. I've added to it over the years. Another 100 acres to the north last spring. Good grazing land, with a view of the mountains that takes your breath away. You're expanding the ranch? Building for the future, he said simply. A future I hope won't be solitary. The implication hung between them, unspoken but clear. Nora's heart quickened. Wade. He took her hand, his expression earnest. I'm not asking anything tonight, Nora. Just want you to know that when I think ahead now, you're always there. Take whatever time you need to be sure. July brought blistering heat and the annual Independence Day celebration. The entire town gathered for races, contests, and an evening of fireworks. Wade and Nora attended together, their relationship now an accepted fact of Silver Creek life. As darkness fell and the first rockets illuminated the sky, Wade slipped his arm around Nora's waist. Beautiful, he murmured. Yes, she agreed, though she was looking at his face, not the sky. He caught her gaze and smiled. Meet me tomorrow at dawn? There's something I want to show you. The next morning, Wade arrived at Nora's cabin just as the first light was breaking over the eastern horizon. He helped her mount Solomon, then swung up behind her, his arms encircling her as he took the reins. Where are we going? She asked as they rode east past his ranch. That 100 acres I mentioned, he replied. Wanted you to see it in the morning light. They rode in comfortable silence as the sun rose, bathing the landscape in golden hues. Finally, they crested a gentle hill, and Wade reined Solomon to a stop. Before them stretched a meadow dotted with wildflowers, sloping down to a clear stream lined with cottonwoods. Beyond rose the mountains, majestic in the morning light. It's breathtaking, Nora whispered. Wade dismounted, then helped her down. Taking her hand, he led her to a spot overlooking the meadow where a large flat stone provided a natural seat. I come here sometimes to think, he said. To remember why I stayed when so many others moved on after the war. I can see why, Nora replied, absorbing the peaceful beauty surrounding them. Wade was uncharacteristically nervous, shifting his weight, his hand repeatedly touching something in his pocket. Finally, he turned to her with resolution in his eyes. Nora, I brought you here because this is where I want to build a home. Not just a house, I have that already, but a true home. He took both her hands in his. I love you. More than I thought possible after everything I've seen and done. You've brought light back into my life when I thought I'd live in shadows forever. He knelt before her, drawing a small wooden box from his pocket. Inside nestled a ring, a simple gold band, with a small diamond that caught the morning sun. It was my mother's, he explained. My father gave it to her when they decided to make a life on the frontier together. His eyes, earnest and vulnerable, held hers. Nora Blackburn, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? Of building a life with me here? Joy and certainty filled Nora's heart. The journey that had begun with tragedy in Philadelphia, leading her to a flood-swollen river where a brave cowboy rescued a child, had brought her to this perfect moment to love found when she least expected it. Yes, she said, her voice clear and sure. Yes, Wade Ryder, I will marry you. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to gather her in his arms. Their kiss was a promise, a beginning, a bridge between their separate pasts and their shared future. When? He asked when they finally parted. Soon, she replied. I don't see any reason to wait. August, perhaps? Before the new school term begins. Wade's smile was radiant. August it is. He gestured to the meadow below. And here? Could you picture our home there, beneath those cottonwoods? Nora followed his gaze, imagination painting a picture of a sturdy house with wide porches, children playing by the stream, evenings spent watching the sun set behind the mountains. It's perfect, she said softly. Absolutely perfect. They were married on the first Saturday in August beneath the cottonwoods on their new land. The entire town turned out for the celebration, which stretched from midday well into the evening. Tommy Parker served as ring bearer, proudly carrying the simple gold bands on a small cushion Mrs. Miller had sewn for the occasion. Wade had begun construction on their new home, though it wouldn't be ready until late autumn. In the meantime, Nora would move into the ranch house, juggling her teaching duties with learning to be a rancher's wife. "Are you nervous?" Mrs. Miller asked as she helped Nora prepare in the hour before the ceremony. "Strangely, no," Nora replied truthfully. "It feels right in a way I can't quite explain. As though everything that happened before, even the painful parts, was leading me here." The older woman smiled, adjusting the wildflower crown in Nora's hair. "That's how it should be. Marriage isn't about forgetting the past, but about creating a future that honors it." When Nora walked toward Wade, who stood tall and handsome in his best suit, she carried with her the memory of James, the life she had left in Philadelphia, the journey that had brought her west. But her heart was fully present, fully committed to the man whose blue eyes never left her face as she approached. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, spoken clearly for all to hear. Wade's voice was steady until the final promise, to cherish and protect you all the days of my life, when it roughened with emotion. As he slipped the ring onto her finger to join her engagement band, his hand trembled slightly, the only outward sign of the depth of his feelings. The celebration that followed was joyous tables laden with food contributed by every family in town, music, dancing, and more than a few happy tears from those who had watched their relationship blossom. As evening approached, Wade led Nora away from the festivities toward two horses waiting saddled nearby Solomon and a gentle mare Wade had trained especially for Nora. "Where are we going?" she asked as he helped her mount. "Thought we might spend our wedding night somewhere more private than the ranch house with half the town still celebrating in the yard," he replied with a smile. They rode for half an hour, climbing a gentle slope until they reached a clearing where a small cabin stood, smoke curling from its chimney. "The line cabin," Wade explained as they dismounted. "Used during roundups when we're working the far pastures. Not fancy, but it's sturdy, and—" he grinned, far from prying eyes and well-wishers. Inside, Nora found the simple one-room structure transformed. Lanterns cast a golden glow over fresh linens and flowers. A small table held wine, bread, cheese, and fruit. A fire crackled in the hearth, warding off the evening chill. "When did you do all this?" she asked, amazed. "Had some help," Wade admitted. "Mrs. Miller and Sarah Henderson rode up this morning." He took her hands in his. "Wanted our first night as husband and wife to be special, even if it's just a line cabin." "It's perfect," Nora assured him, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "Absolutely perfect." Their new life together began with the rhythm of the seasons, Nora teaching during the week, while Wade managed the ranch, weekends spent working side by side on their new home. By November, as the first snows dusted the mountains, the house was ready for them to move in. It was everything Nora had imagined that day in July: sturdy log walls, wide porches, large windows that captured the magnificent views. Wade had incorporated bookshelves into every room, knowing Nora's love of reading. The kitchen was spacious enough for teaching Tommy Parker's mother and several other town women the Eastern recipes Nora had brought with her. As winter settled over Silver Creek, Nora and Wade established traditions of their own, reading aloud by the fire each evening. Sunday rides when weather permitted, visits to town where they were now greeted as a couple firmly established in the community's fabric. Spring brought news that filled their home with joyous anticipation. Nora was expecting a child, due in late autumn. "A baby," Wade whispered in wonder, his hand gentle on her still flat stomach. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" Nora asked, though his radiant expression answered the question. More than I ever thought possible, he replied, gathering her close. When I pulled that boy from the river last year, I never imagined. He trailed off, overcome. That it would lead to this? Nora finished for him. To us? To a family? Wade nodded, his eyes suspiciously bright. Life has a way of surprising you, doesn't it? One moment you're a solitary man convinced that's all you'll ever be. The next you're building cradles and planning for a future that suddenly seems endless with possibility. Do you ever think about how close we came to never meeting? Nora mused. If I hadn't taken the teaching position, if you hadn't been by the river that day. I try not to, Wade admitted. Makes me realize how fragile happiness can be, how much depends on being in the right place at the right time. Or perhaps it was always meant to be, Nora suggested, leaning into his embrace. Perhaps we would have found each other somehow, no matter what. Wade's laugh was warm against her hair. My practical school teacher, suddenly believing in fate? Not fate, she corrected. Just the rightness of us, as though we were two halves of something that was always supposed to be whole. As summer turned to autumn, Nora's condition became more pronounced. She continued teaching as long as possible, finally yielding to Wade's concerns and the school board's insistence that she rest in the final month before the baby's arrival. October brought crisp days and cold nights, the cottonwoods turning golden along the stream below their home. Wade became increasingly protective, rarely leaving Nora's side when he wasn't tending to essential ranch work. You're hovering, she teased one evening as he adjusted pillows behind her for the third time. Can't help it, he admitted without apology. Want everything to be perfect for you and the little one. The baby, a daughter they named Elizabeth, after Wade's mother, arrived on a clear November morning just as the sun was cresting the eastern mountains. Doc Miller pronounced her perfect in every particular, and Wade, holding his newborn child for the first time, found himself utterly transformed by a love he had never imagined possible. She has your eyes, Nora observed as they marveled over their daughter's tiny features. And your determination, Wade replied, watching the infant's fierce grip on his finger. Heaven help us when she's older. The years that followed brought changes to Silver Creek and to the Ryder family. The railroad reached town in 1884, bringing new settlers and opportunities. Wade expanded the ranch, employing several hands and becoming one of the territory's most respected cattle operations. Nora eventually returned to teaching, though on a limited basis, devoting most of her energy to raising their growing family. Elizabeth was joined by a brother, James, named for Nora's first husband in a gesture that acknowledged the path that had led them to each other. 2 years later, twins Thomas and William completed their family. Through it all, their love deepened and strengthened, weathering the inevitable challenges of frontier life, harsh winters, economic downturns, illness, and occasionally the return of Wade's wartime nightmares. But they faced each trial together, their partnership a source of strength and comfort. On a warm spring afternoon in 1888, almost exactly 10 years after their first meeting, Wade and Nora stood on the porch of their home, watching their children play in the meadow below. Elizabeth, now 9, was teaching 6-year-old James to ride his new pony, while the 4-year-old twins chased butterflies through the wildflowers. Did you ever imagine this? Nora asked, leaning against her husband's solid warmth. That day by the river when you pulled Tommy from the flood. Did you ever imagine we'd be standing here a decade later? Wade's arm tightened around her waist. Not in my wildest dreams. I was a lonely man who'd convinced himself that was how life was supposed to be. He turned to face her, his eyes reflecting the same love they had shown on their wedding day. You changed everything, Nora. You made me believe in second chances. We saved each other, she said softly, just as you saved Tommy that day. From the meadow came shouts of triumph as James successfully guided his pony in a small circle, Elizabeth clapping encouragement. The twins abandoned their butterfly chase to watch, demanding their turn on the gentle mount. Wade laughed, the sound still Nora's favorite after all these years. I suppose I should go referee before they all try riding at once. Nora caught his hand as he turned to leave. I love you, Wade Ryder. More today than yesterday, and not as much as tomorrow. His kiss was tender, familiar yet still thrilling after a decade of marriage. And I you, Nora Ryder, for all of my days. As Wade strode down to join their children, Nora watched him go, this man who had once plunged into floodwaters to save a child, who had opened his heart to love when he least expected it, who had built with her a life rich with purpose and joy. The path that had led her to Silver Creek had begun in sorrow, but had flowered into something more beautiful than she could have imagined. From the moment she had stood at the edge of that raging river, determined to save a child, to this perfect afternoon watching her family thrive in this land they both loved, Nora had discovered that life's greatest blessings often came from its most unexpected turns, and she wouldn't have changed a single step of the journey.